Sometimes the universe will just conspire to give me a free video. It just hands me a video topic on a silver platter. Behold, an article from The Atlantic titled "The Other Way the Superwoke Left Discriminates." Subtitle, "Race and Gender Aren't the Only Categories That Determine Who Gets Special Treatment," written by Thomas Chatterton Williams. And as you can tell by the way that I kind of smugly talk out of the side of my mouth when saying that title, it's like Thought Slime Catnip. A pompous asshole at the most pompousest assholist magazine there is, complaining about wokeness? And even teeing me up to talk about Superman? Throw in some M&Ms, dude, and that's basically my entire channel. Real Mildred Core hours over here at theatlantic.com. To emphasize how truly brain dead this article is, I want to read to you from the opening. I'm not going to read the whole article because it was behind a paywall and I don't want to get in copyright trouble, but I do need you to hear how this essay opens to set the stage for the kind of twisted mind we'll be grappling with here. Progressives often follow a particular pattern when they want to dismiss a phenomenon that challenges their beliefs. The writer Rob Henderson summed it up in a tweet in 2021. Step 1, it's not really happening. Step 2, yeah, it's happening, but it's not a big deal. Step 3, it's a good thing actually. Step 4, people freaking out about it are the real problem. This was the left's archetypical response to any number of excesses and abuses perpetuated under the banner of social justice. We're off to a rip-roaring start, just quoting a really long-winded tweet in its entirety, but here's where it really gets good. Including cancel culture, the outbursts of violence during the so-called racial reckoning of 2020, the violations of even basic fairness at the peak of the #MeToo movement. I'm buzzing. I'm so excited. There's just so much horseshit crammed into those two scant paragraphs, one of which mostly written by some other guy. That tweet, I've seen it before. I always kind of thought it was about the right's reaction to climate change. Apparently it's not, I guess, but it's pretty telling to me how easily it lends itself to that reading. Step 1, pretend it's not happening? Check. They sure love to do that. Oh yeah, buddy, there's real global warming going on. I just shoveled 3 feet of global warming off my driveway this afternoon. Step 2, admit it's happening, but claim it's not important. Yeah, they love to do that as well. You know, or yeah, the Earth's temperature might have fluctuated a little bit, but if you look at the temperature of the Earth geologically, it's always fluctuating. It's a few degrees. What does that even matter? What are you even freaking out about? Step 3, it's happening and it's a good thing. Check-a-rooney. Look at these libs trying to demonize carbon. You know, we're made of carbon. All of that carbon dioxide trapped in the atmosphere, guess what, dummy? That's what plants eat. Plants are gonna love having more carbon dioxide. It's good for the environment. People freaking out about it are the real problem? Huge friggin' check. That's their whole fucking thing nowadays. Finger wagging at anyone getting too excitable about the planet ending. Did you really need to splash tomato juice on a painting or block traffic or sound kind of mad in a speech? That kind of thing is way worse than destroying the biosphere of the only planet in the universe known to host life. I want to get on your side, I really do, and I care deeply about this issue up until the second I'm called to sacrifice even the smallest thing. I belabor this point because that's kind of interesting, right? Naturally, both sides of the political aisle are going to see their opponent the way the tweet describes. I'm on the super woke left, and I see the right that way, and they see me also that way, I assume. Except, why the fuck would they? I thought the whole thing about the super woke left that these ding-dongs were meant to dislike in the first place was that we are supposedly rigidly ideological, that we refuse to consider ideas outside the limited scope of our worldview. That is, as we shall see, a foundational premise of Williams's entire argument in this article. What are some examples of these Schrodinger's problems that the left simultaneously accepts as true, but not important, but also not happening and impossible? He helpfully listed a few. Let's go through them one by one, shall we? Firstly, cancel culture. It is the year of our Lord 2026 Anno Domini, and I ask this of thee, who hath been cancelled? Who are the cancelled ones in this culture of cancellation? Who is it exactly that's been unfairly silenced and marginalized upon the altar of political correctness? Because it seems to me like all the biggest examples that people list are multimillionaires doing better than ever, like J.K. Rowling, Louis C.K., Mel Gibson, all supposedly canceled beyond salvation, and all thriving in the toxic, polarized media ecosystem we have allowed to be built. Even when it's not some rich douchebag, even when it's just some random person caught in a scandal, a person who has, without a doubt, out done something terrible, they seem to find a way to profit off of it. Some rando will just scream the N-word at a toddler, and by the end of the week, they'll have crowdfunded hundreds of thousands of dollars. Can we, perhaps, move on from this talking point? Perhaps the problem is not that the left is too prudish and censorious, even if that may indeed be the case sometimes on Blue Sky. Perhaps the bigger problem is that too few people seem to get canceled, actually. That there are no consequences for being bigoted or even predatory, so long as people on the right like you. But if you're a trans professor, you can be fired for giving a student who didn't complete their term paper a failing grade. Is it really the left who is too censorious? The left who is out there canceling people? Because we wag our fingers annoyingly when you make a shitty joke? Like, get a fucking grip. Secondly, the outbursts of violence during the so-called racial reckoning of 2020. Outbursts. The outbursts of violence. The violence which burst out from nowhere and nothing. Thomas, my dude. Can I call you Thomas? No? Okay, sorry, my bad. That was very familiar. Don't know why I thought we had that kind of relationship. Mr. Chattering Williams, is it your view that the violence and the outbursting thereof is a product of this supposed reckoning with race and heretofore did not exist until said reckoning was underway? That things were peaceful and then became violent so quickly that one might characterize it as an outburst during the so-called racial reckoning? Do I have that correct? Those are the words that you wrote, so I'm going to assume those are the things you believe. Some of our more skibbity 6'7" viewers may not remember this, so just a quick little refresher for the year 2020, which was kind of a fucked year, actually. The supposed reckoning that Williams is describing here began when a police officer murdered a black man named George Floyd who had not committed a crime. Though even if he had, you can't just summarily execute people on the street. The cop kneeled on Floyd's neck while he suffocated, and Floyd desperately warned him that he could not breathe. And this became kind of a flashpoint for frustration about the over-policing and incumbent frequent murdering by police of black people. If I were to pinpoint at which moment this violence burst out, I would say it's there, actually. The murder. I didn't think I would have to explain this to a senior fellow at The Atlantic, or indeed a conscious person, but murder is violent. Why would you choose to begin the story after that event? Like, it does feel like the natural starting point to discuss any outburstings of any violences. Now look, was some of the backlash to that very public murder and the centuries-long history of murder and oppression it became a symbol for itself violent? Sure, probably. But and just hear me out on this. Who gives a shit? Is that the problem? You're mad that people got violent in response to a murder? That they weren't calm and civil about how they get murdered all of the time? That's the big danger here. Do you hear how it sounds when I say it out loud like that? And thirdly, the violations of even basic fairness at the peak of the #MeToo movement. And I'm gonna keep it real with you. I don't know what he's referring to here. He doesn't list any of these supposed violations. But this claim is all the rage nowadays, that #MeToo went too far and a bunch of normal men, innocent men, had their lives ruined in a witch hunt. People love to say that. But one thing they don't seem to like doing as much is listing examples, because it doesn't seem like there's any big important ones. Now, did that happen anywhere in the world? Maybe, I don't know. I'm sure some deeply unshowered people are now listing their supposed examples in the comments, and I do appreciate your commitment to justice, if and when it means excusing sexual assault, but even if it were the case that people reacted too harshly to some individual men during the heyday of #MeToo, still quite strange to me to focus on that supposed injustice rather than what I see as the much bigger problem of women constantly being attacked, taken advantage of, marginalized, and silenced. That one can pretty much take it for granted that all women have stories of these things happening to them. All of this to say, it's pretty ironic that you, Thomas the Tank Engine Williams, are doing the exact thing the tweet you took such pains to quote earlier criticized. You have arrived at its fourth step. You were complaining that the people freaking out over the murder of black men or the absurdly common rates of sexual assault and sexual harassment women face are, in fact, the real problem. Okay, let's get productive a little bit. Let's get into some of the article meat now. Let's get into the article's substance, or dare I say it, it's their lack of bazinga. Williams claims that there are two ways that we, the super woke left, discriminate. Firstly, and most obviously, we conspire to withhold opportunities and resources from that most underserved of minorities, the humble white male. To wit, a flurry of controversy around another shitty article written by Jacob Savage, which Williams spends a lot of this article trying to defend. Starting around 2014, Savage writes, in industry after industry, gatekeepers promised extra consideration to anyone who wasn't a white man, and then provided just that. Help! Help! They're providing extra considerations! Savage marshals ample data to make his point. In 2011, he writes, white men occupied 48% of lower-level TV writing positions. In 2024, they filled 12%. Out of 45 tenure-track hires in the humanities and social sciences at Brown University since 2022, he says, just 3 have been white American men. Since 2015, according to Savage, 70 millennial writers have been named finalists for National Book Awards. Once again, he writes, only 3 have been white men. Those are some conspicuously specific examples, wouldn't you say? Only 12% of lower-level TV writing positions. Only 3 people in the tenure track for specifically the humanities and social sciences at Brown University. Of the 70 millennials nominated for the National Book Awards, that kind of thing should ring alarm bells for cherry picking. If broader statistics were similar, why would Savage, and by extension Williams, need to choose such absurdly specific statistics? And that first example is particularly telling to me, because it's evidence of a supposed hiring bias against white men that they represent only 12% of lower-level TV writing positions in 2024. And just taking that at face value, is it not also a problem that in 2011 that they represented 48% of said positions? Why does it become a problem when they are supposedly underrepresented, but not when they're overrepresented? Because in order for them to be overrepresented, definitionally, someone else would have to be underrepresented. So why is it only a problem now? But let's not take it at face value, because that cute little qualifying phrase, lower-level TV writing positions, got me thinking. What about if you didn't qualify it like that? What if you didn't phrase it in that very deliberate way? What happens? Do you get the same result? Or do you, I don't know, get a wildly different result? Gee, I wonder. If only there was a way to check. So let's take a cheeky little peek at that Writers Guild of America's Inclusion and Equity Report 2025. And in 2024, screenwriters were 44.4% white men, whom the report also helpfully notes represent 28.3% of the general population. Now, if you're not a math whiz, 44 is considered to be a bigger number than 28 by most experts in the field. So, would appear white men are still well overrepresented by almost 2 to 1. Okay, but what if we break up these two words, white and men? Then we find that 66.4% of writers were men and 64.6% were white. I'm no statistician, but I think you would be hard-pressed actually to suggest that they represent a hiring bias against white men. It's telling that Savage uses the example of specifically lower-level writers, because as near as I can tell, that's just about the only statistic one could cherry-pick from these reports that, on a surface reading, even appears to support the case he's trying to make. The section of the report which the statistics come from is careful to note that these numbers are not reflective of trends among higher-level positions. I wonder how Savage missed that. Let's think about that for a little second. Let's take a moment, have a sip of tea, and have a single thought about that. Either white men are just inherently better writers and better qualified than their non-white and or non-man peers, a position which I think is unlikely to be the case because it is self-evidently racist and sexist, or within the industry there exists a culture which, however unintentionally, discourages women and racialized people and the intersection thereof from succeeding. The obvious inference from this data is that attempts at making entry-level hires more diverse are likely not the result of institutional gatekeeping, as Savage would prefer to believe, but rather an attempt to correct for the existent institutional bias which continues to favor white men, who remain overrepresented and are even more overrepresented in higher level positions. The amount of information that Savage, and by extension Williams, would need to have skipped past in their own source, mind you, to make this argument show how dishonest this whole exercise is. These are not dumbos making an honest mistake. These are grifters cherry-picking stats to make a bad faith argument. To quote the fourth page of this report, which I simply can't stress enough, is Savage's source. The number of WGA screenwriters declined between 2020 and 2024, and shares of screen employment held by men, women, BIPOC, and white writers have changed modestly since 2020. The largest shift was a 3.4 percentage point increase in the share of women screenwriters in 2024. Oh, that's the problem then. That's got to be what it is. It's the women are taking they have 3.4% more now. So that accounts for all of this, right? Men of the world, you must revolt against your female overlords. So that's the first example. I don't think it's very good. The second example he gives is that of 45 tenure track hires in the humanities and social sciences at Brown University, only 3 were white males, according to Savage. Anyway, his proof for this? I don't know what his proof for this is, because he links to an article from Brown about their tenure track hires, and that article lists 38 of them, so we're not off to a strong start. This article does not list how each hire reported their ethnicity, or their nationality for that matter, so I don't know where Savage is getting that information from, but charitably, I'm going to assume he is getting that information from somewhere, and didn't just look at this picture and consult his skull chart. But taking a quick peek at what Brown's website has on offer for demographic data, they don't give a breakdown for their tenure track specifically, let alone their tenure track in the humanities and social sciences specifically, not that I could find anyway. But on their website, they did list the amount of white men on faculty has indeed plummeted from 365 in 2015 to a scant 359 in 2024. That's 6 fewer white men, a meteoric drop of 1.6%. In fairness, there were way more faculty members in 2024 at Brown, 880 compared to 732 in 2015. But in fairness, I still think you'd once again be hard-pressed to suggest that this represents a hiring bias against white men, given that 28% of the population still accounts for 40% of faculty positions. It rather seems to suggest that the hiring of non-white and or non-men has not meaningfully harmed the white male workforce at Brown University. So, something to think about, dog. And finally, the third example, that since 2014, only 3 of the 70 millennials nominated for National Book Awards have been white men. Once again, I do not know where Savage got this statistic. He did not list a source for it. But if we look at the data, it does appear that since 2014, there has been a marked increase in racialized people being finalists for the National Book Award, according to data drawn from Alexander Marshall's new book, Writing Backwards, Historical Fiction and the Reshaping of the American Canon. 27% of the prize's finalists and 30% of the winners between 1988 and 2022 have been writers of color. In the last decade alone, those figures are higher still. From 2013 to 2022, racialized writers comprised 56% of the finalists and 65% of the winners for those 2 prizes. What an interesting statistic. Taken in isolation, it would seem to support Savage's position. If history had started in 2014, it would be very concerning. Want to know another interesting statistic? In 12 of the past 35 years, there were no racialized people selected as finalists for the National Book Award. So since 1990, the year Home Alone was released, about a third of the time, there have only been white people chosen as finalists for the National Book Award. And that goes without comment in Savage's piece, and by extension, Williams's citation of it. But when racialized people eke out a slight majority of finalists and winners for a few years, well, now it's a fucking crisis. In all of these examples, when white men are systemically privileged across the board for decades, centuries even, that's business as usual. It's a bad thing, obviously, but it's over, and it doesn't need to be reckoned with at all. That could lead to an outburst of violence, and you don't even really need to check that it's over, really, because it has the vibes of being over, doesn't it? However, if you could cherry pick some stats to imply that white men are no longer automatically being given everything in the world, that means they're being bullied out of academia and the media. The pendulum has swung too far in the other direction, and now, and only now, is it a problem? Sure, it's all well and good for women and racialized people to advance in the world, more power to them, but that shouldn't come at the cost of eating into the overrepresentation of white men. That clip is going to be cut out of context and used in a video about how BreadTube are the real racists. Shoeonhead is going to say that I hate white people. I can feel it. I don't. I am white people. When people talk about white people and all the bad stuff they did, that was me. I did that. What the fuck was I talking about? Why am I always talking? Now, some of you out there might say that I'm being uncharitable when I accuse Savage of cherry picking. I think I've pretty conclusively demonstrated that I'm not, but you don't have to take it from me. Even Williams agrees that he probably is. And even though the essay is full of shocking numbers, they are almost certainly the result of some degree of cherry picking. And of course, it's true that for most of American history, men who were deemed white tended to be afforded privileges and opportunities not available to others. But over the past 2 decades, I have seen firsthand the dynamics that Savage describes. So yeah, those numbers are probably misleading. I don't know. I didn't check. And yes, it's true that in the grand scheme of history, the exact opposite of my position has always been true. But I feel right. So, sure, Williams is writing an opinion piece. I can't exactly criticize him for giving his opinion, even if his opinion sucks ass. But to give data to support your opinion and then say, actually, that data might be wrong, but never mind because it still feels right to me either way, that's simply not something which should proceed past a first draft. It shouldn't even make it into a first draft. And here's a little writing tip from me, a nobody, to you, a senior fellow at The Atlantic, Mr. Williams. If you suspect that Jacob Savage is cherry picking, and that's a good instinct, by the way, you should follow that instinct, you can check that. Check the things he said, like I just did for his stupid YouTube video. It's actually not even hard at all. This is a level of ideological rigor that I, a crank on YouTube, find embarrassingly unprofessional, and you're writing for the fucking Atlantic. Moving briskly along, the second and more important argument Williams is making in this article is that the benefits and privileges he presumes are afforded to non-white and/or non-men are only given to those select few minorities who are in ideological lockstep with the superwoke gatekeepers of culture. These gatekeepers have typically favored women or members of racial minorities, but only those equipped with a prefix menu of progressive values and beliefs. Many of these favored candidates spoke in esoteric codes and espoused beliefs that put them at odds with the majorities of their respective ethnic and gender cohorts, as polling on progressive shibboleths such as police abolition, pronoun innovations, and jargon like Latinx has consistently shown. Such progressive shibboleths as police abolition, only the hoity-toity upper crust could possibly understand those 2 words. And all the pronoun innovations, like they're fucking mad scientists. Hey, call me they. What? It's crazy. How am I supposed to keep up with all of this jargon? Williams, who is a senior fellow at The Atlantic, is writing that he has been unfairly silenced and gatekept from a position of relevance. No one is entitled to a particular job or award, and no one wants to hear complaints from someone like me who has found compensation in competitive fields. But the fact remains, well-meaning men and women who have the temerity or naivety to nominate me for a prize or board seat have told me with some embarrassment that they were later informed that my perceived views on matters such as my own privilege and the primacy of open debate had essentially rendered me ineligible. A similar process played out when I tried to find a publisher for my latest book, which criticizes the excesses of 2020's fury. My views, I was told, did not align with the kind of black perspective that presses wanted to publish. And man, I want to be very careful here about what exactly I am criticizing. It is in fact bad and a problem that only certain voices within the black community are deemed appropriate for publication. If black conservatives are silenced on the basis that their blackness makes their conservatism more unpalatable than that of their white peers, something I don't doubt is the case, that is in fact really bad. I am not criticizing Williams for pointing out the paternalist, racist connotations of being told he's the wrong kind of black voice. That's certainly not my place to speak about. And even if it were, I think I would agree with him. But that is just anti-black discrimination. That is just the phenomenon he has spent so much of this essay, and indeed, it seems, his career, denying the relevance of. One of the controversial points which he claims makes him politically radioactive in this very sentence is his own wealth and privilege. That he and many other black people are privileged in other ways, and thus, through some truly asinine rhetorical alchemy, he claims that to insinuate that black people in general have it worse than, say, white people is somehow infantilizing and racist. But here we are, with straightforwardly an example of him being excluded on the basis of his race, that because he is black, his political positions make him ineligible for consideration by all those gatekeepers with their pro-minority bias. A white conservative wouldn't face that sort of backlash. He's experienced this anti-black but only when they're conservative bias, and he wants very much to align that with this anti-white male bias he believes is the real problem, actually, and not any structural bias against black people in general, which he sees as somehow condescending to acknowledge. And if you're following along at home, some black people are rich and well-connected, so it would be racist, therefore, to assume that black people in general face any sort of institutional racial bias. This standard, it seems, does not apply to white people, some of whom, and I know this for a fact, are also rich and well-connected. That's not paternalistic or racist if you suggest that they face any systemic racist bias, even though they don't. Williams can just tell, like in his bones, that some minorities, other minorities, they're being advanced unfairly. He just knows that from personal experience that he's had with people. And sure, some of the stats that he uses to back that up might be cherry-picked. It's impossible to know. Nobody can look at numbers. They're boring. But he can tell. But don't you dare resent him personally. He is still the subject of unfair persecution for his political beliefs, and only his political beliefs. He doesn't get the unfair advantage he's discussing here. That only goes to the liberal minorities. He's still gatekept from any position of acclaim. And I guess we're meant to believe that, like, he deserves better. He'll say shit like, as a member of various selection committees and recruitment initiatives, I have been privy to conversations in which gatekeepers have passed over white men, in part because they were white men. And if we move briskly past that load-bearing in part, you are a member of various selection committees and recruitment initiatives? And yet, we are to believe your conservative politics, and only your conservative politics, make you persona non grata to the liberal gatekeepers of media and academics? Like, your views make you ineligible to receive awards or sit on board seats, but that they don't prohibit you from being on the judging panel for those awards, or who decides who goes in those seats. Do I have that correct? His personal experience is the only evidence he supplies for this supposed bias against the specific intersection of black and conservative. And so it's worth pointing out that he seems pretty fucking successful, actually. Are we to believe that greater success is owed to him personally? And if so, based on what? He's doing pretty good. Keep in mind that by Williams's own standard, the existence of black people who are privileged in some other way means that it's racist and paternalistic to suggest that black people as a whole face systemic injustice. But he's still confident that black conservatives specifically are gatekept, based on his personal experience as a well-respected and well-compensated black conservative. And I just want to stop here and just say that I have no doubt that there does indeed exist a publication bias against black conservatives. I doubt, however, that that is the result of ideological gatekeeping from the Superwoke left, because you may notice that white conservatives seem to get published all the time and seem to own a lot of publishing companies, for that matter. Perhaps there is, for some reason, less of an audience for black thought among conservatives. Now, I don't mean to imply that conservatives tend to be white and racist. It seems to me like the conservative beliefs Williams is espousing here would be seen as transparently racist if a white person espoused them. If you think I'm being too sensitive, if a white guy were to have described himself as, and this is a direct quote from Williams's Wikipedia page, having physically assaulted his high school girlfriend and attributed his actions to the influence of hip-hop's, quote, pimpin' culture, how would you characterize that? There's a few things that bother me about that claim, but I wouldn't say that my problem is that they are too conservative. A bigger problem than any publication bias against black conservatives specifically is that there just seems to be a publication bias against black people in the United States in general. It's definitionally a bigger problem because it includes the problem he is discussing. The Authors Guild of America released a 5-year study in 2022 and reported that despite persistent outreach to organizations supporting non-white authors, 81% of the sample identified as white, consistent with NEA's regular book reader percentage. Only 8% of sampled authors identified as black, 2/3 of whom, by the way, were self-published. Only 1/3 of black authors were traditionally published. They also reported that published white authors earned 2.5 times what black authors earned in both books and author-related income in 2022. Side note, one explanation for this discrepancy might be that according to the Lee and Low Diversity Baseline Survey, 72.5% of workers in the publishing industry are themselves white, in 2023 anyway. What a heartening story of resilience in the face of super woke gatekeeping. Now, in the interest of transparency, because I don't actually want to cherry pick my statistics, both published authors and publishing industry workers do skew heavily female. Could have used that to write about something savage. That's a real stat. I found a real one that you could have used for your crybaby bullshit, but I don't know. Women also read more books, so I don't know if that actually fucking matters, quite honestly. Williams has to juggle a lot of ideological priorities here. He needs to appeal to white male grievance politics to make the case that minorities and women are actually benefiting unfairly from systemic bias, actually. But to do all of that without admitting that he himself owes anything to such a bias. He has, after all, unlearned his race. It's so funny to me that he's striking this aggrieved tone, like he's this overlooked talent slumming it in the fucking Atlantic, because the man just can't handle the way he speaks truth to power. And the truth that he's speaking is like, well, you know, the power's got it pretty rough, actually. The power's really going through it right now, and everyone should be nicer to the power. Welcome to 2026, the year I get more subscribers than Mr. Beast. It's going to happen. We are only 461.7 million subscribers away. Be part of the movement. Subscribe now. Look at all these fine folks who gave me some money on Patreon for the hard work I'm doing of making fun of other people's work. I'm a little parasite. Give me more of your blood. Yum, yum, tasty blood. Sorry, did I say that out loud? What I meant to say was press the like button and watch more of my videos to increase my watch time and click-through rate. These are things that should be important to you.